what are the best practices for miking a choir? Audix 5650s of 100 to 200 people in a traditional worship setting. And also, are there any EQ settings for each voice parts that are the best? So maybe just talk a bit about a choir, if you would, Paul.
Yeah, I would say if you're miking a choir when there's no band, a choir that large is usually like a choir plus pipe organ or a choir plus piano. It's not usually that large of a choir plus rock band because that brings up a whole different thing. Not that I haven't seen that, and Scott as well. We've dealt with that a lot of times where there's a pretty big choir, and by the way, here's a rock band 5 feet away from the choir. So I'll answer to both cases. If it's a traditional setting and there's a choir plus pipe organ, choir plus piano, or choir by itself, I would say even for a 100 or 200 person choir, there's nothing better sounding than just two, maybe that large. You'd go 4 mics, 6 mics. You don't need that many mics. You want to put them 8 feet away from the choir and let the air mix the choir. And then I do very little EQ. I would do a high pass filter just to get rid of the rumble of the mic. For example, if someone bumps the mic and things like that, those types of mics are just going to destroy your subwoofers if you bump them. And so I do a high pass filter at maybe 100 or 110 hertz, and then mic them far away. And what you can do is you kind of mic the sections, meaning you're miking the sopranos and the tenors and the altos section. That gives you a little bit of flexibility to mix those parts. But this is really letting the choir mix themselves. All you're doing is reinforcing to the speakers what sounds great at a 20 foot away distance. Does that make sense? Now, if you're miking them and there's a drum set 10 feet away and then guitar amps, of course, we would hope that the drum set would be isolated with a shield, the guitar amps would be off stage. But if there's a lot going on stage and there's wedges, monitors, and there's a band, well, now you've got to get those mics close to the choir. And that's what's lousy for you because now you're miking individual voices. So you're always going to hear the one lady or the one dude that sounds, odd. You got to move the mics. You got to start hurting everybody's feelings. Or honestly, we've done situations where we'll dish out 20 SM58s to the key people covering all the parts. We'll still use some general mics, but those are turned way down, and you get these 20. We did over Easter where we had I think it was an 80-person choir plus rock band, and we had, I think, 30 SM58s, and the choir director had dished them out to the right people. This is the craziest sounding thing, but dished them out to the right people, the best singers, covered all the parts. We used, I think, 4 condensers to get a little bit of the group, but honestly, that was more for show to make everybody feel included, and those 30 voices were really what you heard. But then, of course, they cut. But then your biggest challenge is, they cut through over the band. Now you can really hear the energy of the choir over this rock band. And this is not for an aggressive church. This was Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa, so it's a real middle of the road in terms of aggressiveness. But still, you're doing Hillsong United type songs, over with the choir. And these 58s on these select few really made the choir pull out of that band in a great way that you can give as much of the choir as you wanted. Without the band just drowning them out. Finally, when it comes to EQing, when you're doing the far off miking, like I said, do very little EQing. Those mics just sound great. They reinforce the room without much EQ at all. If you're getting into the 58 approach, and then you roll off top end because the 58 with a close mic is going to sound so direct and aggressive. You got to do a low pass filter if you have that on your desk, or if it's an analog desk. Without that, you're going to just roll off the treble, roll off the high end to make it sound darker, because that's what a mic sounds like when it's further away. I hope that helps.
That's great, Paul. Would you mind even just hitting on, do you do anything different for different choir parts? Like, let's say, the sopranos, tenors, altos. Are you EQing any of those parts differently for the mix?
Not when they are, not when it's far miking. When you're miking with mics 4 to 8 feet away, other than a high pass filter to get rid of the rumble on the bottom end, I really don't EQ much on the top end at all. It just those types of mics, those Audix mics, or any good, Earthworks and AKG and all those good condenser mics, they just really sound good. Uh, this is where we got to say you have to trust the mic and have a good mic on a good choir, and you shouldn't need EQing. The oldest of best recordings, there was no EQ. Consoles had a bass and a treble knob or knob, and so I don't think we need to think too much about EQing when it comes to a choir, other than if you're doing the handheld supplemental mics.